Hey guys, so today what we'll be talking about is positions. So we'll be talking about the three most important positions that you need to be aware of: relative, fixed, and absolute. So by positions, I'm basically meaning the position CSS property, and you can see like we have a bunch of these properties: sticky, static, relative, fixed, and position, and absolute. And the first three are the most important ones that you need to be aware of. Now let's have a look at these. So if you have a look, and I'm just going to create like a container. I'm going to say, okay, it's going to be, obviously it's already full since it's a div, and I'm going to say the height of the container needs to be, let's just give it something large, 96. And then let's say the background of it needs to be gray, and then 100. So here we have the container, and I'm also going to give it a margin top of, let's say, 32. And as you can see, okay, so we have the margin top, and I'm going to add some text in there. This is some text and then I'm going to create a box. I'm going to say div.bg. So one thing again with the autocompletes, you can easily like say div, and then you can say dot is going to apply the class to it when you press tab. I'm going to say bg minus green minus 500, and then the width is going to be 40, and then the height is also going to be 40. And if I press tab, as you can see, that's there. And I'm going to give it some text as well, box, and I'm going to make it text minus white. Let's just increase the width and the height a bit so it's more visible. So here we have the box, and then also let's just center the text as well. So here we have the box, and let's just start one by one. So I think let's just start with the most simple one. And I think like the most simple one is position fixed. So what position fixed does is, if let's say I save, and then obviously it's not going to change its current position because we haven't specified where it actually needs to go. But let's say if I do a top minus 0 and then a left minus 0, it's going to go to the top left. So what position fixed does is, it actually, imagine like you have a couple of things stacked on top of each other. So consider these as stacks. So you have some text, and then after that you have the box, after that you have something else. And as soon as you keep adding things, like for example, if I were to add, let's say, multiple things here, as you can see, okay, so you have this thing stacked, below it you have this, below it you have this, below it you have this, and below it you have this. So what position fixed does is, it actually just ignores all that and says that I'm going to respect the viewport. Whatever you see on the screen, like this box that you see, I'm going to respect the edges and the boundaries of this, and I'm going to position myself in reference to that. So what it does is, I just said position fixed, and then I said like I'm just going to be sitting at the top, and I'm just going to be sitting at the left, and that's what it does. It just observes that. Similarly, I can say I wanna have it sit at the bottom, and I can also say, hey, I want to give some spacing at the bottom. I don't really want it to like set fixed to the bottom, so I can say, okay, it's going to be bottom 12, and then whatever. So one other thing that I'd like to point out, and which is really great, is let's say if I give a class and I say all of these are going to be like 96 in height. So as you can see, now we have the scroll going on. But you can see, since we've given this fixed, it's always going to be fixed relative to the screen that we're seeing in front of us. So it's always going to be this sticky sort of a thing. And I think you might have seen like a lot of these boxes which have arrows to the top, like scroll to top arrows. And that's what position fixed is basically about. And I think like that should be pretty simple. If there are any questions, do let me know. Now, moving on to some other matters. Position absolute. Now, what happens if I give it a position absolute and then I save it? As you can see, I saved it, nothing happened. But now let's say if I scroll down, you can see that it's in a weird state. It's absolute, but I don't know like what's going on. So the thing that happens here is that an absolute element respects any of the parents that have a position relative applied to it. Currently we don't have a position relative, so it doesn't really know how to behave. So it's just positioning itself initially with respect to wherever it was, based on, let's say, the screen that's currently in, but it's not respecting the screen as we scroll through it. So what happens now is, let's say if I apply a relative to its container and then save it, as you can see, it respects it now. What it does is it's going to respect this particular container, and I can just inspect and show it to you. So this is the container that it's respecting because I've given it a relative. So absolute says, hey, I have absolute authority over everything. Obviously it doesn't go beyond fixed, but I'm still gonna respect a parent or anything that's like relative to me, or anything that sits outside of me but has the property position relative applied to it. So that's what it does. So let me just remove this height, since there's a lot of content inside of this box. All of these elements are height 96, but they're exceeding the box. I'm just going to remove this height since it's not serving the purpose, and let's just save it. So now as you can see, the box disappeared. Why? Let's go to this particular container that has relative applied to it. So I can see it has a height of 1920 pixels, and you can see that on the top left of the screen. So I'm going to scroll down, and as you can see now, it's actually respecting, similar to previously, it's respecting the container that it's inside of, and that container must have the position relative applied to it. So that's what this particular thing does. What absolute does. Absolute also respects its parents that have absolute applied to it. So I can say absolute, and now you can see some funky stuff happened where the width of the content changed, and I can just say, okay, just take the whole width. But now it's still doing the same. It's still respecting its parent that has a position absolute, or a position fixed, or a position relative that's applied to it. So those are really important things to know about. If I, let's say, remove this and give the position relative to the body, and I say, okay, this is going to be relative, and I save it. So as you can see, now it's gonna respect the relative tag of the body, and it's going to position it itself with respect to the body tag. Now I'm just going to give it a margin bottom to show you what's happening. So I've given it a margin bottom as well. So as you can see, let's just give it a padding bottom to, or no, I think like a margin bottom is probably fine, but let's just say we have some other content inside here as well. So heading, and then let's just call it text -4 Excel. I'm going to save it, and I'm just going to go down, and as you can see, like the body tag actually ends here. I'm just going to duplicate these headings, and I'm going to refresh. I didn't really refresh since it's auto refreshing, but now as you can see, I can hover over the body tag, and this absolute element is respecting the first most relative element, the first most relative parent that it gets to respect. So currently we just have the relative on the body tag, but now let's say if I were to apply the relative tag to its immediate parent, it's going to start respecting that parent. So I applied that, and as you can see, it actually starts respecting this parent and actually positions itself accordingly to this parent. So that's really important. If you want to give anything an absolute value, always know that you have to give the parent that you want it to respect a position of absolute, relative, or fixed. And note that similar to the fixed position, absolute position also just takes the element that's positioned absolutely just out of, let's say, out of the tree, or out of the hierarchy, out of the stacked pages reference that I was giving before, and just floats it in midair. Imagine like it's levitating, and it just doesn't matter like what's beside it, what's in front of it, or whatever, but its floating position, that levitation, is going to be in reference to the element or to the parent that's going to have the relative, fixed, or absolute position applied to it. So that's really important. Now to the last thing, and that's like relative. So what does relative do? So let's just remove this, and let's just have this box, and as you can see, if I remove it, remove the absolute, now it's not levitating, it's respecting all of the content that's above it. It's going to sit right below it like a good boy. So what does relative does? And first of all, even before that, like this bottom and the right thing doesn't really work, right? It's not working, it has stopped working, nothing happens. But why is that? So the problem with this is that this bottom, right, top, left, these properties are only respected if you have certain position properties applied to the element that you're giving these properties to. So I gave it absolute, and as you can see, it's respecting the absolute thing. You can see it's okay respecting that. If I give it fixed, it would also be respecting it based on the actual screen that you see in front of you. And then if I give it a relative, what it's going to do is it's actually going to say, wherever you are, O relative parent, or sorry, not O relative parent, wherever you are, O relative child, or this element, take your current position and alter it by whatever value of bottom, right, left, top I apply or I give to you. So that's what it does. It says I'm going to be sitting wherever I am, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my position 48 pixels from where I currently am and just change it. So, and then the same goes for the right. So imagine, like, I'm just going to remove this, remove these properties, and I'm just going to apply them bit by bit. I'm going to say left, and then I'm going to say 40. Left 40 is 160 pixels. So it's going to say is wherever I'm sitting, move me to the left by 160 pixels, and I'm going to save it. And as you can, move me to the right by 160 pixels, because when you say left 40, it actually adds spacing to the left of the box, and then the box moves to the right. Similarly, if I say right 40, it's going to add spacing to the, it's going to add spacing to the, yeah, it's going to add spacing to the right of it, and then it's going to, the box is going to move to the left and obviously off the screen, because yeah, it just went off the screen because it's like too much. But let's just apply a slightly lower value to it. So 4 is doing that, and let's say if I were to have a similar box and I didn't give it any value. So as you can see, the box is this, the box at the bottom doesn't have any property applied to it, but the right -4 basically moves it to the left by 16 pixels. So that's what happens when you actually do that. One other important thing to note about is that these right, left, bottom, top positions don't actually, don't literally, like they literally move the box out of the content or out of the stacked layout that we previously talked about if there's a relative applied to it. So what happens is when an element is positioned relatively, it's still sitting in that stacked order. But when you apply a right, left, top, bottom position to or a value to it, what it actually does is it visually, just for you, just visually positions itself according to whatever value you're saying or asking it to. So for example, if I were to say, let's say top -40, so what it's going to do is if you save it and then you go, like, it's basically just going to move it to the bottom, similar to the thing that we did talk about. It's going to move it to the bottom. But now, as you can see, if I actually, let's say, what can I do to showcase that to you? I'm just going to remove these heights just so I can showcase that particular example to you. So I removed these height. So now as you can see, obviously the element has moved 160 pixels down from its original position, but as you can see, it's still occupying its original position. Even though nothing exists there, but there's still this empty space there that actually this box is occupying. So when you do top, left, bottom, right, and there's a position relative applied to it, it actually doesn't detach it away from the stacked layout of the container. It doesn't levitate, it doesn't do anything. But actually it does levitate, but it levitates in a weird way. It preserves its original spot in the hierarchy in the stacked layout of pages, but it doesn't take away that position. Instead, it just visually levitates. So it's still there. Imagine, like, this box is actually still there. So imagine if I were to change the height of this box to say it's slightly larger. As you can see, this height increases and this height increases, but the box, you can consider it to still be there, but it's still changing its visual appearance to be somewhere else. And those are the three things that I want you to remember about, like position fixed, position relative, position absolute. We're going to run into a lot of these things, and we're going to talk about it when we're designing websites. But this is probably one of the most important topics when you're talking about, like, positioning elements here and there and then doing some funky stuff. And this is something that you really need to get a hang on. So yeah, those are it. If I just have to give a summary of what I talked about, and I'm just going to write it here as well. Let's just write it. Position, actually I don't really like this blue color, so I'm just going to remove this blue color. I'm going to save the file, and I'm going to say I haven't done the gulp watch, so let me just do that so it reads my changes, and then let's just save this again. So let's just go here. I'm going to say position fixed, positions the element relative to the screen you see in front of you, and position absolute positions the element relative to the first relative parent it finds, its own parent obviously. And position relative does nothing, basically does not do much, but if you use it, so I'm just talking about like position relative, element relative, so I'm just going to change that. Position absolute positions the element relative to the first relative slash absolute slash fixed parent it finds. Position relative does not do much, but if you use the right, the top, left, right, bottom properties with it, it visually changes their position by the value with respect, their position with respect to the value that you've given. So those are the three things that happens, and obviously this isn't really formatted well, but let's say if I were to do that, I can just go in 3XL, I just remove that, and I can say I need empty -20 on all of these. So yeah, that's what it does is, and I'm just going to remove this so it's visible for you guys, and I'm going to be pushing this code so you can experiment with this layout, you can play around with it. But again, if there are any questions, concerns, anything you did not understand, do let me know, and we can have a follow-up video for this, or if it's like something simple, I can also reply in the comments. So thanks a lot. In the next video, we'll be talking about flex a bit more extensively, since apart from positions, flex is a really huge and popular topic, and we use it quite a lot in some of our designs. And then after that, we'll be talking about, I think probably grids. So yeah, do subscribe, do like the videos, and do comment if you have any questions, or just let me know if there are specific videos that you would like to see instead of those, and yeah, I'll consider those. Cool, thanks a lot.